Hey guys, welcome to the Sakuyamon X Antibody gameplay guide with the new EX8 support cards. Pretty interesting to see that we get the EX8 cards in the English format before the actual other main line of support from BT19, which we're going to be getting in 2.5 really soon. So stay tuned and subscribe if you guys want to see more updated Sakuyamon content on the channel. And today we got Dan playing this deck, piloting, and we're going to commentate over it and see how he does and how he plays. The thing is, even without the BT19 cards, Sakuyamon is still able to pull off some really crazy aggro, OTK potential combos and burst damage out of nowhere. And the main idea is it can also climb up all the way to stack from its Rena X into QB, Tao, and into Sakuya and Sakuya X very quickly thanks to having cards like Physical Training, mainly the Digivolution plugin S, and as well as Yellow Scramble, which this deck is really good at abusing. And here, we're just gonna go ahead and jump into it, playing against Skatymon, Hexablow, Ice Snow, Ice Clad trait, which is also new support from EX8, really exciting to see. So, analyzing the situation, both sides are just trying to set up. When it comes to the mulligan hand, and when it comes to Sakuya X, you just want to see your line to climb up, and eventually you just want to find your Rikas, you want to find your plugins, your option cards that you can play, because the more options you can play, the more value you're going to get. You're going to gain memory, you can security minus, you can DP reduce your opponents and control the board. But ultimately, you're trying to do damage as much as possible. Now, we can see he's trying to cycle. I think right now he's just missing a level 5 Taomon at the moment, but he's ready to climb up. This early Hexablow right here is just really good to bomb deck that Rika. And without Rika, you can't really go for your combos. But that's a 3-cost Rika, which is not as important. We're still focusing more on the 4-cost one from EX2 because that gives you a lot of free plug-in plays when you attack. Now, when it comes to this particular matchup, it becomes a little bit more difficult because especially with Hexablow right here, building the stack and trying to overcome its sources just to attack is going to be very challenging because it shuts off the when attacking effects of Rika because we can't even suspend. So I can see he's a little bit in a pickle here. He's trying to climb up outside, which I personally would have actually digivolved at the back and maybe even tried to like sneak in a Rena X on top of the Renamon so then the stack can be larger than Hexablow. But I can see at this point he's kind of like had to climb up anyways. But I would have actually even like tried to set up like a TK and try to see what I have in security and play a little bit slow. But that's also a little bit another thought process where I can see Dan is trying to, you know, accelerate the game plan a little bit and try to start doing things because the amount of damage that Hexablow can output from this because of the new Polar Bearmon, I believe, with Hexablow, it can do 3 checks in one go. And that's a lot of damage. And the new Ice Snow trait or this new support can really aggressively do a lot of damage, just like Sakuyamon itself as well. So this is being really tricky now because with Suzune and with Frigimon, it can strip a lot of sources and Dan lost all of his inheritables there. But we can see that Dan's trying to slow down the Hexablow a little bit with lesser damage just because with like Cubimons and Renamons, like security -1 effects from using an option card from earlier on, just to stay in the game a little bit. But the Hexablow side is still continue to build the board. The Ice Snow trade, there's no rookie in the back for them just yet, but this is okay. But they continue to stun things down, which doesn't really matter because Hexablow just shuts us off anyways. And that is again why I mentioned earlier is I feel like my priority would be try to build a stack in the back if possible. And then once you come up with a big stack, you can start swinging and then you can actually start doing your combos there, which is generally one of the ways to play around Hexablowmon, which is quite a problematic card when it comes to this. I can see that he has TK that he can choose to use, but then that's going to pass the opponent to 3. And then with Suzune's, they're going to go up to 5. And, you know, it's also really dangerous. At the same time, although I feel like Maid Mode Ace is not played as much anymore, and it's still something that you can be wary of when you're playing this deck because you want to pretend that you might have a Maid Mode Ace. Having that Taomon there can potentially threaten it and it can do things and you can sort of play around. The opponents don't know what options we have in our hand. That's the thing, right? So you can kind of always try to bait them into it a little bit. Using the Digivolution plugin S, I can see he's trying to go into Sakuyamon here, but then he decided to go into Taomon instead, which I think is also still fine. Because going into Sakuya is not going to do too much. It's not going to be able to attack. You're not going to be able to use the end-suspending effect either. And there's not enough really like DP reduction to rack up to get rid of Hexablow. And that's just once again, if he had those inheritables and he kept them, and then once he pushes that out in one go and uses those option cards, he can potentially DP reduce the Hexablow all the way down to 0 and remove it that way instead. Now earlier on, the security -1 was given to the Polar Bearmon so that the Hexablow goes in for the checks, but luckily founds a Venusmon, and there's no jamming in that stack, so it gets rid of it. And this is actually Dan's chance to actually make a comeback. So it looks like, again, the opponent still doesn't have a rookie to work with, and they end with a Frigimon there. Now, I highly doubt there's going to be aces in that deck, although you could play like Vikemon Ace, but I think this is opportunity to go for the potential OTK. Now, I would have actually sequenced this a little bit differently because it's dangerous to go into the security with Sakuya, because Sakuya at the end of the day only has 11k DP. Which is why I would have preferred using either the jamming plugin or swing with Tau first with barrier so that it guarantees my stack to be alive. And unfortunately, running into that Hexablaumon there proves that it just seals off the entire win condition that Dan could have pulled off here, because afterwards what could have happened is that if the Sakuyamon or the Taumon survives, you can digivolve into Sakuyamon for reduced cost, and then digivolve into that. Afterwards, Sakuyamon unsuspends, you can go for 2 checks and then go into Sakuya X for only 1, play out a token, rush, swing, and there will be enough attacks to go for the lethal, because Sakuya X also gets to unsuspend something at the same time. And because of that, now he's forced in this situation where he has to like awkwardly digivolve into Sakuya X and then just end the turn with a plugin right here. So a little bit of a suboptimal play. Could have did it better. And the fact that there's another Skatymon in the security means, again, it's very, very important to utilize that jamming. Always make sure to utilize the jamming with Sakuyamon as much as possible before going for the damage. You can greed for the damage first without jamming, but that can punish you and set you back really, really hard, just like this. And all the opponent needs to do is just swing with both their Digimon. Of course, they're playing a little bit safe. Looks like they want to go for a Skatymon play anyways, and then they gain quite a lot of memory with Suzune as well. Scramble into Skady. Skady plays something out, and Skady now has the potential to actually unsuspend because it's going to play like a second Frigi that's going to have more than attacks. Even like a Shine Gray Ace is not going to help at this moment. Skatymon is just going to go for it, and it's just going to tuck the Frigimon underneath to unsuspend. And then here's checking into Rika, unfortunately finishing off the game, but that's okay because Dan will showcase other cool combos in the following games. So for the next game, facing off against Agubond, which is kind of a newer deck, but more from the LM set thanks to having the Agubond Ace card. It's going to be really cool. This one that Dan's facing up against is the Ancient Greymon package one with Aguni. And looks like Dan is the first one going. So it looks like he wants to mulligan his hand. I think ideally it's always about like against an aggro matchup, you just want to see your optimal pieces build into your stack. Again, finding your plugin options to deal as much damage as possible. Ideally it's going to be the red plugin with the blue plugin. So then you can do 2 checks jamming at a time. Try to suspend as much as possible and then take them down there. The Agubond Rush strategy is also pretty aggro, pretty viable, very strong as well. So that's also one thing to be very wary of in this matchup. Playing against it as well, especially if there's an Agumon on the board and the opponent has 2 or fewer security, you got to play around the potential ace. So anyways, let's go hop back into this main play here. Luckily, playing that Renamon, he was able to find the Cubimon that he needs. Although I would usually just go for physical training just to pass him to 2 memory instead, but this works fine because I would just like to keep the Renamon for a additional rookie to work with just in case if I don't find a second one afterwards. So both sides were just trying to set up as much as possible. Dan's trying to find his pieces, the opponent's trying to also find their pieces. Analog use is always really great. Ukomon there is also one of the reasons why it really gives it the part of the rush strategy. So Dan has a couple options here. He could just go ahead and start digivolving up outside or push out and start doing it. But it looks like he wants to take it a little bit slow, and finding the physical training or using the physical training, finding the Venusmon is actually going to be really clutch here because all he is missing is just a level 6. Now he has QB, Tau, and a Venus to climb into to at least establish a first stack. And this game is really going to showcase why Venusmon is actually really good in this particular matchup. So he decides to pass to 2 to give as little memory as possible, digivolving the QB at the back just because there's no Rika to play off the hand as well. Having Rikas and Tamers is always really, really important because those are the cards that actually allow you to use your plugins without meeting the color requirements. If you don't have those, you still need to meet the color requirements. That's the really most important thing. And setting up the Rika is what he's going to need. But so far it's okay. That's why the deck runs physical training. That's why the deck runs yellow scramble, which is why I can still use the in-color stuff without necessarily just relying on Digivolution plugin S. This check on the red plugin is really good because he is able to find the Rika he needed now. Unfortunately, the QB is not going to be able to use that effect for when digivolving because he kind of passed over that, but we can see earlier he has the EX2 Talmon, and the EX2 Talmon always lets you play a Rika for free from the hand when you digivolve right into it. So the opponent's just trying to chip away, they're setting up Augros, they're just trying to attack, checking into another plug-in red right here, which is fine. Not finding a Rika, no tamers, you know, is not always the best hit, but that's the whole reason why he also runs like additional tamers like TK, which you guys may have saw earlier as well, and that is just ensured by having as many tamers as possible. Here he is about to actually kind of use the Digivolution plugin, but again, like I mentioned earlier, no tamers, you cannot use it because you need to still fulfill the color requirements. So the ideal line to play is really, like you guys can see right here, to use physical training first. Go into Talmon for 1 cost, Talmon plays out the Rika, and now you can also use the when attacking effects and all that. I potentially would try to clear the board here at this moment, but I can see he's also trying to acknowledge the fact that the Aguni's at the back ready to come out. There's a potential Ancient Gray, and when he does the when attacking, it can actually just pop off the either the whatever he brings out his stack. So he needs to get into Venusmon this particular turn. Although again, like you guys can see, there's no other level 6 to work with, so it doesn't make sense to go into Sakuya anyways. And this is one of the really nice game plans, and this is really good for having Venusmon in the deck naturally, because you can build your first stack with Venus, and then once your Venus slows the game down, you establish a second one in the back, and you come out, and that's when you go into Sakuya and go for the explosive burst damage combos to finish them off that way too. And yeah, Venusmon fits very, very nicely, and you guys will also see later on with all the inheritables and all the combos it can pull off, is great. So yeah, once again, I think he's trying to see if he wants to either clear the board or try to even just go for security, or finding a way on how to pass turn, because the next turn is going to be pretty crazy and it could be potential lethal as well. So going for Digivolution red first, not Digivolution, I mean the red plugin first to gain sec +1. The Talmon doesn't have jamming or any kind of like sort of like security protection at the moment, so this is why he's going to swing with it, use the Rika to play the jamming, which I mentioned earlier. It's always really important to make sure that you have jamming in there, so he can go for 2 checks. Although the security wasn't as strong, but that's still okay, that is still the safer bet. And then it looks like he's going to go for yellow scramble to end the turn to go into Venus, passing the opponent to 3 memory, but Venus will lock out the board, preventing them being able to use any when attacking or when digivolving effects, and even just attacking into chipping into security in general. Looks like the opponent still wants to push up with the Aguni. That's because I think they have the Uko and trying to sort of like turbo hatch and continue to build a stack and keep up like the momentum as much as possible. But the Aguni won't be able to, it can attack, it won't do any checks, but it won't even be able to use its when attacking to warp into an Ancient Gray. So the opponent will just have to find a way to set up, probably stall out the turn a little bit, and set up the tie and get ready for the next one. And here is when Dan can start trying to see on either how to control the board. If there was a rookie established ready to push out, then he could actually potentially go for the game-winning play this particular turn. So we can see that he needs to actually find a way to slow it down one more turn. If he can slow it down for one more turn and prevent the lethal from happening from the opponent's side to finish them off, he will have the game. Using Venusmon to give more security minuses thanks for using the option cards with the QBmon inheritable. Renamon can also gain memory back, Talmon can DP reduce, getting rid of that Agumon, and it's really important to get rid of that Agumon like I mentioned earlier before he checks, because before attacking into those 2 security, the opponent can potentially go into Agu Bond Ace, and then that will just potentially get rid of Venus. The Venus doesn't have the blanket minus security right now, but it does give the security minus to the Aguni, keeping it in check, so then it makes sure that the opponent can't go into the Ancient Gray. So now he needs to just find a turn to pass as little memory as possible as he could, but the opponent's side, like when it comes to having the tie and pushing out Agumons, there's so much value. He can, you know, come out, gain a memory, draw with tie, hatch 1, and that's just only 1 tie, and the opponent still starts at 3 memory. So here Venus is really just trying to hold down the fort. There's not enough checks in the board at the moment. Really comes down to if the opponent can go into like an Agumon Ace plus something, maybe a hybrid for game to finish it off. But they're gonna need to have all their pieces and the resources ready as well. Going into the Greymon, Greymon still counts as an Agumon, which means it can still go into a Agu Bond if the opponent chooses to do so. Either warping with tie, or either just go straight using the new Ace version with its alternative Digivolution requirements. But once again, Venusmon is really holding it down. It kind of came down to lucky as well. Aggressively making those 2 checks, and the Venusmon gets deleted by battle, would be really, really bad. Here, there's a little bit of a mistake. The opponent tries to attack and tries to use the when attacking effect, but with the Agumon inheritable, but caught it in time, so that's okay. Reverted it back, so it's not able to search off of it anyways. But it looks like the opponent wants to grab like additional Agumons or find some certain pieces or maybe Tamers. But again, shutting off when attacking effects is especially good against red decks like this. Venusmon is actually just a really, really huge counter, or really comes in really clutch in this particular matchup and in this particular situation. Opponent goes for a chip with Ukomon, and then finding a Rika there for BT17 is going to be great. Extra memory to work with, potential warping if there's like a Renamon. And here the opponent once again back, it looks like they're a little bit stuck. Looks like it's going to be difficult, you know. Venusmon makes them think. Really tight situation, because they know if they're not able to make a huge turn comeback or, you know, do something meaningful or impactful this particular turn, Dan's gonna get in the bag the next turn with additional attacks. There's enough inheritables with DP reduction to get rid of Agrumons, and the opponent might have to even set up multiple Agrumons for it to remove, but we have enough removal, which is great. So it looks like they're gonna go for the warp into the old Agrumon instead, and by doing so, that is free to still use his when attacking effects and to delete the Venusmon, which is fine, but they're not able to finish the game just yet, unless if they might have like some potential to gain additional memory, hybrid for game, or maybe push out that Agumon. And it looks like really tight, and they have a Louis, but it's just not enough to gain and keep turn. But there is the Agumon on the board, which Dan is gonna have to deal with to get rid of it once again to actually play around the Agu Ace. We can even see that the opponent's pretty much holding half their deck in their hand, so there's a high chance that they have. And using this is where with Yellow Scramble is going to be really helpful, grabbing a specific piece that he needs, and then also potentially playing a rookie, which is going to be Rena, to search and fetch off, guaranteeing to grab that Sakuyamon X if needed too. So the Renamon can't attack because it's just played this turn, but at least there's something ready to go and raising. Of course, grabbing the Sakuya X, as mentioned, and with additional memory from Rika BT17 and physical training, and still with like 2 Digivolution plugin S's, Dan is definitely in a good spot. Using physical training, Digivolve into Tao. Tao is going to play out another Rika. And then here, with multiple Rikas, he can use multiple Digivolution plugins S's if he wants to. He can use more options. Going to go attack, spending the Rikas to use those options. He's going to go for 1 first. And then by using that, lets him Digivolve into Sakuya. Inheritable of Rena X is going to let him DP reduce something by 2k, which is going to be the Agu, and then with Sakuya is going to minus 3k as well, giving security -1 to once again to Aguni, and this finishes off the game. So in this game, facing off against Nature Spirits, which also got quite a bit of number support in EX8 in the form of like Green Line with like Kabuterimon and the Insectoid, Tentomon, and all that, and a whole new ace, which is Hercules Kabuterimon as well. And that could be pretty interesting because now it's fundamentally changed into a green base with the Modimon that you guys can see here, and that new sort of like, I guess we call it field spell, or like the special trait option card that kind of treats and giving like all the Nature Spirits Digimon alliance, which gives the damage that the deck really needs. But anyways, let's go back more side on what Dan is doing, starting off with Rena X and a TK, and start cycling to go into QB, trying to find a plugin option, but doesn't seem to hit one, which is unfortunate. Bottom decking those Talmons are pretty big too, just because of how important they are. But he manages to find another one off of the Renamon search and grabbing a security +1 plugin on top of that as well. So that's gonna be good for the potential aggro and OTK that he's gonna need. NSP is gonna come out with Eldoradi. Eldoradi plays out Tentomon and Otamamon, and thanks to this new search where Tentomon can help you grab pieces, makes it more efficient, and Modimon allowing you to attack, which is really nice. Kind of interesting how they chose not to use Alliance here. Maybe they just wanted to take it a bit slow. They don't want to give like value, but this gives Dan an opportunity to continue to climb up. Either way, he wants to see if there's a chance to clear the board. He's likely going to try to remove as much as he can, and I think as he's trying to Digivolve, he's racking up quite a lot of DP reduction effects, and he has the flexibility. He might look to try to take out the Eldoradi bit by bit, but maybe he feels like he won't be able to do that in this entire turn, So I think he wants to get rid of both the Otama and the Tento and then just put for a bit and then see what he can do the following turn. Most importantly is just try to stay with the stack. It is tempting to swing in here, but remember guys, what we mentioned is really important to have that jamming plug-in to ensure that you can swing safely in security. And even though the Eldoradi is at least 12k blocker, where Sakuya can't really run over, which is why again the blue jamming, the blue plugin is going to help a lot there because it can't be blocked either from that. Now here at this moment, then might as well, maybe it makes just more sense to get rid of Otama and then just try to keep the stack alive, because this Sakuya stack is going to be super valuable in terms of DP reducing everything moving forward, to play around aces, to play around these blockers and towers of defenses when it comes to nature spirits, which they have big bodies. And it's also important to respect that the security can potentially have a lot of things that's 12k and above. Talakmon's 15k, all the level 6s are at least 12k. So yeah, this is definitely the smarter play, just to take it slow, Digivolve, give as little resources as possible to the opponent, and then next turn he's ready to build up another second stack and he has TK to work with, so he can always use his Digivolution plugins without really needing to meet those color requirements, which we always mentioned about throughout this entire video too. Looks like NSP doesn't really have a rookie to work with in the back at the moment, so it really comes down to what they want to sort of do. They can kind of control the board a little bit. This is where the Kabuterimon comes down, which is kind of nice. It allows them to actually swing over the Sakuya, and the Sakuya doesn't have battle protection. There's no barrier either in this particular stack, so it's not going to be able to sustain, and it gets its security trashed, hitting the Digivolution plugin S from security, which have been really great if it was battled in there, instead being able to use security effect. But that's okay, because there's always ways to climb up back into Sakuya, and Sakuya can actually cycle some of these plugins back and then be able to use them and again, which is really crazy. Talmon first by going into that, playing out Eureka for free with no stipulations when digivolving, that's it. And then now using the plugin S to go into Sakuya, and like I mentioned earlier, recycling all of them, grabbing them back for every tamer is just fantastic. And now you can do a bunch of DP reductions here a little bit, but it's not enough to actually take down anything on the board just yet either. So that's totally fine, as the whole goal is really just try to give as little resources as possible for the opponent to work with. And I know this is supposed to be like a Sakuyamon X antibody sort of like showcase, and in the previous two games, like Dan hasn't really even been able to do that just yet, but this really shows the potential the deck that really has. With its core, it's just really strong. They're gonna go for Alliance 2 checks right here, finding TK. TK gets to grab a card off and then get to recover cycle, which is great there. And here it looks like the opponent's just gonna end with a Jagomon, which is a level 5, and like we mentioned before, this is the time that you're gonna have to remove it. Even though he's down to 1 security, Dan's gonna pop off. Dan's gonna find a way to actually at least get rid of that level 5, and there's gonna be a combination of effects that are gonna come in. So I'm gonna try my best to explain and follow through, because things are going through quickly. I think initially here he wanted to use yellow scramble, but he kind of thought like, okay, you know what, there's actually a better line to play, because he can go into Rena X first, Rena X to grab Digivolution plugin back, because then that could rack up the perfect inheritable to help him get the magic numbers of the DP reduction. And then now he would use yellow scramble to digivolve. Mistake that he thought he was going to use plugin S, so he drew a card, but it's fine, he's going to draw for digivolving anyways. QB, because it gets into that, Sakuya and the Talmon effects are going to reduce a total of 5 on the Jaggermon first, on the right stack. The Rena X doesn't trigger just yet, because now he uses the Digivolution plugin S manually to go into Talmon. Talmon, that Rena X is then going to be able to reduce the Jaggermon for another 2000 DP, and that's a total of 7 thanks to the previous one that gets rid of it. And then Sakuyamon triggers once again, because it's not once per turn, so then it gets to reduce the Eldoradimon now for 3000 DP, putting it down to 9. Now with Talmon's when digivolving effect, use Digivolution plugin S, go into Sakuya. Sakuya is then going to grab that back. The right Sakuya is going to minus by another 3k, and then here the Aldiradi is sitting at 6k, so he finishes off by using physical training, and both Sakuyas will trigger once again, which is not once per turn, reducing 3k each, getting rid of that Aldiradi. Really great safe play here, really good. You guys can see how crazy how it racks up all these DP reductions as you sort of use those Digivolution plugins, as you use the option cards. It's just really good, and now he's set up for a really good turn. because next turn he can just finish it off. Like I mentioned, this is probably the time that he's going to get into Sakuya X, go for the aggro combo, and basically check all 5 of them and finish them off the next turn with all those resources, with physical training, yellow scrambles as well. There's just a crazy amount of stuff he can do, and he's almost like decking out. He's holding essentially his entire deck in his hand, so he has absolutely everything and all the resources he needs, and that is such a powerful board clear. It looks like the NSP players now, sticky situation. They finally found a rookie, but all they can really do is just Digivolve in the back and pass. If they Digivolve back in the pass, Dan's just gonna go for it. So Dan is again sitting in a very, very, very good position because of this. And looks like it comes down with a Medieval Gallantmon for a full 7 cost, reducing it for 4 by spending both Sakuyas. And then here, this is why this card is also just really, really good in this set, honestly. It works very well in SP. It's going to pop the one without protection of the Wizardmon, and then it's going to use Vortex to trade into it, and just one card like that just clears the entire board. But the nice thing is it gives Dan 5 memory to work with, and that's more than enough, so he can easily go for a yellow scramble, come back with a Renamon Surge, stack something that he needs, and now he's going to go for that crazy combo, which we're going to show you guys. The Rika bio-merging is definitely in clutch, because, you know, being able to pay 4 memory to Digivolve straight into a Sakuya, paying less memory is going to be fantastic. Although as you climb up the stack and you use Digivolution plugin S's, you can kind of preserve memory that way too, but he just went for it here, and then going to Sakuya, grabbing a whole bunch of options back and plugins that he needs back. At this point, he can set up a way to potentially try to actually make some attacks. He's going to swing with Sakuya, a little bit risky here, because I mentioned before, having jamming is probably a little bit more important, but he's going to Digivolve into QB. QB is going to do a little bit more searching. There's not many cards left in the deck like we saw. So here, it's just one check, and it lives. Because it lives, this is really good. Now he's actually going to play a little bit slow. He can see that, you know, with one rookie and nothing else on the board, there's nothing he can absolutely do the opponent to sort of counteract. So he goes in Taomon. Taomon is going to be able to use a scramble to Digivolve into a Venus for reduced cost. And then with that, gaining the memory back thanks to Renamon, putting the opponent perfectly to 1 memory. And at this point, NSP can only just go up to a 5 and threaten an ace, because for sure the next turn, they know we're going to go for the OTK. Sakuya X, and with the red plugins and blue plugins that he still hasn't really used yet, or he can always recycle back with Sakuya, is going to finish it off. And you guys can see there's absolutely everything that he needs. So first, he's going to use red plugin to give security +1 to Sakuya. And what that does is going to trigger all the inheritables of the DP reduction, with Sakuya minusing 3, QB minusing 2, and another Tau minusing another 2, getting rid of the Shogun Gekomon. Although I would argue like he can kind of like use it when he swings and use the option card off of Taumon's inheritable for free, and that will go up the same. But I think he's trying to not just attack blindly, because he wants to make sure that he can go for the Maid mode here. And once he gets into the Maid mode actually lets him use another plugin option. So he's probably ideally wanting to use the jamming here now at this moment. And by going into the jamming one, Maid mode swings for 2 checks, and it'll be totally safe. And you guys will see just in a bit on again how important it really is to combo and sort of sequence it that way, because there's a 12k Eldorado in there. And if this deck got deleted, then it's over. So now he can go safely into Sakuya X, playing out a token and still have 2 memory to work with. And then he's gonna use another plugin as he attacks with Venus, with the effect of Sakuya X to use the red plugin, giving Venus sec +1, going for the 2 checks. And with the final security, the NSP player is guaranteed to hard drop a level 5, and depending on what it is, it could kind of change the situation of the game. So it looks like there's only a Jagamon to come in. Jagamon is going to de-Digivolve whichever stack, it doesn't matter, because with the resources he has, he can easily just Digivolve into something again. Sakuya to unsuspend if he needs to, Sakuya X to play another token, and at this point it doesn't really matter, because the aces, which ideally usually is going to be Saber, Leo, and Hercules Carpetary Ace, they're not going to stop these barrage of attacks enough anyways. There's enough swings, there's enough unsuspensions as well, and the tokens are 9k, meaning Saber, Leo, Ace is not going to be able to reduce it enough to take them down either. And there's no blocker. They can choose to block with the Jagamon here, but then after the block, there's just nothing they have in the board either. And yeah, it looks like it's a Hercules Carpetary. Although it gains the memory past the turn, Dan still finishes off the attack. The Crimson Saber playmat and sleeves are now available on the AVAULT store along with the Chaos Saber mat, where I have a 2-player version and sleeves which are exclusive during this limited time release only. So make sure to grab yours right away, and thank you guys so much for the support. As always, you guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are, and see you in the next video. And this is AVAULT signing out.